Hi class, this is your instructor Megan. In this video I want to talk about visual presentation for websites, and really what we're doing is we're now hitting that last aspect of Vitruvian principles. So going way back to the beginning of the semester, this class is set up to take you on a sort of introductory ride through each of the three Vitruvian principles that we can use to think about websites and building websites. So this is a framework for understanding web design and creating web designs that are appropriate. So first we have to understand what the site is for, the utility, and then the usability. How do we make sure that people can use the site for its intended purpose? That's why we started with usability. It's about accomplishing user goals. The first thing you're going to do when you design your website in this class is figure out what the site is, what people need to be able to do on it, what's the whole point of your site. Firmitas, structure, durability, this is the code, the performance, making sure that your site works. Do you want to be able to write the site in HTML, or is a content management system going to allow your site to be more structured and durable? And now Venustas, aesthetic beauty. Now, at the beginning of the semester, I had you look at some basic principles for web design, and for each one, I asked you to tell me whether it was more about usability, structure, or aesthetics. And these were the results. Wherever you see a darker blue, that's a higher number of people reporting that concept is related to that principle. So for spacing, 10 people said that's a usability issue. For navigation, 13 people said that's a usability issue. And so what this chart shows, I think, is that there's not necessarily a lot of agreement. For example, with spacing, 14 people said it was Venustas, but 10 people said it was Utilitas. But actually, there's only 17 people in the class, so there were 27 different votes. You guys could select more than one principle for each of these. So that high number, 27, shows that people thought spacing was more than one issue. Spacing, they said, is not just usability, it's also largely aesthetics. And so what you get from this graphic really is that idea that the Vitruvian principles overlap one another, and we are now to the point of looking at aesthetics, and that's exactly what we're going to see, is that the aesthetics really overlap with the structure and usability. It's very difficult to tease them out as a separate thing, although you can do that. And you are familiar with aesthetics because you've seen the MilePlus heuristics library, and you've used that and applied it to a website, and there's a whole section about graphics heuristics. So this is looking at the visual identity, the font, the type. Now, these heuristics are more about consistency and making sure the page layouts are navigable and that the font and text is readable. Aesthetics goes a little bit beyond that and looks at actually just the beauty of the site. Not only does the site have a visual identity that's consistent and legible, but it also is beautiful and pleasing to look at. So this week you're going to read about visual hierarchy, concept and inspiration in web design, Gestalt theory, visual direction, color theory, and designing for what's called the fold. Now, if you are a journalism student and you have taken 103, already some of this will seem familiar to you, but you're reading specifically about web design this week, so please note that there will be new material here. It's not just a review of 103. You will want to take a look at the readings. But the connecting thread between all of these readings is Venustas, but not necessarily beauty for its own sake. This is really about using beauty to improve usability. And the key to all of this is understanding why these particular visual presentation techniques and theories, Gestalt theory, color theory, why they're important for web design. Of course, they're well known outside of web design, in the arts and in print design, but why are they applicable to web design, and how do we use these as web designers? And the key to all of this then is understanding audiences and how they see websites. Understanding how to create beauty that also is functional is key to websites. And how do we know our beauty is functional? Well, our beauty needs to support audiences and what they already do on our website. So again, it goes back to usability. And the key here, I keep saying the key, but I guess the overarching theme that you're going to see in these readings, and I'm not going to go through the readings one by one, they're very straightforward, they have lots of examples, you don't need me to read them to you. But the thread here is scanning. This is how audiences see websites. They scan. Their eyes wander around the page looking for pertinent information. You probably saw this when you conducted user testing. I'm sure there were some of you who your users had to do something very easy, and yet they just kept looking around the page and not seeing it. So users, website audiences, they perform scanning, they look around. And what they're doing here when they're scanning is what's called information foraging. You can think about your audience like sharks in the water, sniffing around for a hint of blood to find the wounded animal that they're going to eat. Scanning is all about information foraging. This is when the user's looking for what's important. They already have in their mind an idea of what they want. I want to buy an airplane ticket. I want to see what's new on this site. I want to sign up for something. I want to keep in touch with a friend. I want to see how much this costs. They know what kind of information they want based on their goals. And they're foraging the page, scanning around, looking for where that information is on the page. And over time, what you've seen is that web design has gone from a very information-heavy design where you get front pages with lots and lots of boxes and headlines and pieces of information to presenting more of a simple one piece of information at a time, linking out to other pages rather than trying to put all the information on the front page at once. So you probably have seen a lot of sites where the scanning is quite easy. We've gone from making people swim around in the water for a long time to just giving them a short little pool with a couple things in it to choose from. So this is what web users do. They scan. They look at the page. They don't care about most of it. They just want to see a keyword that's going to help them understand how to do the task they're trying to do. They already know what they want to do. They just need to find where that happens on your site. So how do we know all of this? Through eye tracking. This is a device that you see here pictured is an eye tracker. This is a head-mounted one where the device can actually measure where a person is looking. Of course, now we have a lot of devices like these ones where the eye tracker is actually that big black box under the monitor that doesn't require a headset or anything like that, and we can see where people look at a screen. So these Venus task principles you're looking at this week, we know that they improve web usability. We know they do. We know that they're effective for websites, and we know because of eye tracking. So this is not just a theory of, hey, color is great, we should use color, but we can actually see how it works online. And here's here's the result of eye tracking. Once you get a user to look at the page, you can create, on the left we have a heat map, on the right we have a map of impressions. So on the left we're seeing sort of red is where a person looked a lot or longer. Green, it fades out to green where they didn't look. Where there's no color, there was just no stopping. There were no fixations, is what they're called, where the eye looked at and stopped and read something or looked at a picture. So where there's red, people looked, they stopped and looked. Where it fades out to white, they didn't. They scanned over it. Same on the right, where the blue dots are, that's where there were fixations. We can even see the paths that the user took around the page. Where there's no paths, they didn't scan over it. Where there's no fixations, they didn't stop to look at, either read or look at the graphics. So this has led to some very interesting conclusions over the last 10 or 20 years of eye tracking for the web. For example, one of your readings this week suggests that when you have pictures of people, the people look into the page or look into your content rather than having people photographed who are looking straight on at the viewer or looking outside the web page, to the other side where there's no content. We know that because of eye tracking studies. And here's a really great example from Kissmetrics. On the left is a design where it's basically an ad for diapers, and the baby is looking forward. On the right, the baby is looking at the ad copy, and you see that the fixation on the baby's face was about the same, but when the baby looked at the copy, people's eyes followed what the baby was looking at, and they actually spent more time, there were more fixations on the copy and even on the product, the diapers. So this is not just we kind of think it'd be cool if people looked at content. We know that it works. We know that in many situations it works to have a person on your webpage who's pictured looking at content. And here's an excellent example. Of course, if you created this ad, you of course want people to read the copy, so you're going to choose the one where the baby's looking at the copy. So the big takeaways from eye tracking, you're reading a lot of those this week. A lot of what you're looking at is based on eye tracking studies. But the big takeaway here, again, is just that reader scan and information forage. So you have to use your visuals not just to create something that's aesthetically pleasing and beautiful and looks nice, but something that actually groups information for scanners so they can find the chunks of information that they want and ignore the rest. And you also can guide the visitor's eye around the page. So if you have important information or tasks, you can control whether or not people look at that. It's not just a crapshoot. Based on how you design the page, you can control what people look at. So let's look at that first one. This idea is the idea of chunking, creating clear groups and separating them with white space. This is similar to the idea of functional grouping. Functional grouping is when you group buttons or tasks, elements, action items that go together. So with Facebook, your news feed is one big thing. Everything revolving around the news feed, posting a status, liking a piece of news, commenting on a piece of news, that all happens in the feed. Everything else is on the sides. This is chunking, classic chunking. You're just putting information that goes together on the page. And that's why we're seeing homepages that are broken up just into clear sections. So let's take a look at a homepage really quickly that does that. So here's an example of a homepage that uses chunking very successfully, but uses it to great advantage. So homepages typically will have a large visual element at the top, some kind of tagline that immediately tells the user what this is. So right away, beautifully handcrafted web apps, mobile apps, and APIs. Okay. These people make web apps, they make mobile apps, they make APIs, they work with APIs. So right away you know what this is. The graphic is nice, it's interesting, but it's really that piece of text that tells you what this is. And the chunks here are actually separated with lines. So under this line is the About Us section. And here's a great chunk. It has a headline, it has a list of services with its own mini headline, what our clients are saying, the testimonials with little mini headlines. This is a chunk about us. Here's a chunk about the process. And again, we have a headline, process, and mini headlines for each step of the process. And then of course down at the bottom we have the clients, we have the contact information. So this homepage is just showing you chunk by chunk what we do, who we are, why people like us, the process, so we're just getting in more detail about what we do, and then current clients, if you want to see our work, contact us. Chunk, 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 chunk. Your Bootstrap theme has the same layout. Introduction, my logo, picture of me, who I am, what I do, my portfolio, contact me. Now, these are all one-page examples. Let's look at an example that is more than one page. Okay, here's the website for the University of Chicago, and you can see that their homepage is chunked based on showing a little bit of content from each section. So this website is absolutely massive. There's a section for students, faculty, staff, alumni, parents, visitors. There's an About section, admissions and aid section, academics, research, medicine. I mean, there's just a lot going on here. So what the designer has done that's really great on this homepage is they've chunked the information. They're showing a little bit of information from some of those important areas on the front page. So there's some areas here that are probably not super important for everybody. Parents page is probably not visited nearly as much as about students, faculty, that sort of thing. So they're chunking. We have this slider that gives us news. This lets us know that this is an institution that is constantly doing new things. It allows them to take some of these information from admissions and aid, civic engagement, global, and campus life, and showcase it on the front. Then they have more of a news section here. This is sort of more stories in addition to the ones above. We have an events section. We have quick links to their other aspects of their university where you may have come to this page by mistake, but you really were trying to get to the Fermilab page. Here we have pictures that link us to other important parts of the site. So arts, athletics, diversity, inclusion, global engagement. Again, you see global up here. Campus life, diversity, and inclusion is part of that. So they're pulling out important information that they think most people are looking for and putting it on the front page. Social, YouTube, Explore Chicago, that has information about campus life. So what they're doing is immediately you can tell what this is. Okay, the University of Chicago. And then we have the most important things most people who are visiting are looking for. They're looking for information about what the university is doing. They're looking for events related to the university. They're looking for specific information about what it's like to be a student there, typically with athletics, global engagement, those kinds of opportunities. So this design, instead of putting all of the information on the front, they're chunking it into groups. Here's a little bit of campus life. Here's a little bit of events. Here's a little bit of news. And when you click on one of these things, you can go to another page with all of the information. So designing for the web is really about creating those chunks. And on the home page, you want to really be sure to chunk everything into specific sections because users are doing information foraging. They're scanning. They're looking for something on the home page that relates to what they're trying to do. So your most important tasks need to have some kind of element on the home page in a chunk that a person can find. And these chunks are typically created with a headline or some kind of big text, alignment along the sides in a square shape. This goes back to the divs that we looked at. This indicates that this is one thing. Functional grouping and consistent color, shape, and size. So if we look at this example for Osmo, we have some really clear chunks, right? Our navigation bar is a functional group. It's chunked, it's consistent, the wording or the letter forms are the same, the type is the same, they're spaced evenly, they're the same color. Play Beyond the Screen is a chunk, it's lined up in a rectangular shape. Play Beyond the Screen is our headline. The text is the explainer. The big orange button obviously is going to take us to more information about this. On the left, we have a video that we can share on Facebook or Twitter. So that's one chunk. And at the bottom, we have some reviews, some testimonials. These are chunked. They're in a blue box, so that separates it into its own area. There's white space above the box separating it from all the stuff above it, and it's consistent. Every testimonial is the same color, the same shape, the same typeface. Even the logos have been turned white and grayed out a little bit so that they look the same. So this is obviously a chunk of testimonials. Some sites don't have as much information on the homepage as that one does. Here's a more beautiful graphic presentation where we have chunks. We have something to look at, a visual, and then we have a headline, explanatory text, and buttons, again, in a rectangle. These are in their own div, so we know that they go together. They're spaced very close so that we know they belong together. And of course, by chunking, we can control eye movement on the page. And so what we want to do here is control which chunks the user looks at first. So you have to not only make chunks, but you then prioritize the chunks. What's the most important chunk? What's the second most important? What's the third most important? And here you're going to use especially size relationships. You might use contrast of color. Typically the biggest chunk should help the user understand what the site is, and that's why they're typically across the top. So that Sticks and Leaves example, the big explanation of what they did was in its own chunk right at the top. With University of Chicago, let me go back to not the news but the main page, the biggest chunk is their logo, their bar, and their slider showing elements of the University of Chicago and getting people excited about the kinds of things that they do. So let's look at those Osmo example, or the Osmo example. Not only is everything chunked, but it's clear what's most important. This big chunk in the middle, the YouTube video, Play Beyond the Screen, it's kind of one chunk as a whole. The way they're spaced makes me, as a viewer, believe that they're related. They're not separated by a white space, they're very close. So even though the video and the social media and Play Beyond the Screen are kind of their own chunks, they also work together to make one big chunk. So right away, the very first thing I see on this website is Play Beyond the Screen. There's kids playing by Osmo. If I know nothing else about this product, I know that it's for kids. It involves fun. It involves a screen, which it looks like an iPad in the video, and I can buy it. Then I come down and look at the testimonials. The testimonials are not as important. If you blocked off the top part and only saw the testimonials first, you would have no idea what the testimonials are for. You wouldn't know what this product is. So I'm seeing the product in action. I'm seeing that it's for kids. I'm seeing that it's a screen that has some play element, and I'm seeing that's a product I can buy. Here, same thing, a spacecraft for all. You really can't miss it. It's pretty obvious. This is this site is actually designed so that this is what you see first. When you scroll down, you see more chunks. So what they've done here is they've just made this chunk the biggest. When you go to the site, this is the only chunk you see until you scroll down, and that's becoming more and more common. So that makes it really obvious what chunk has priority right away. This spacecraft for all, see the journey, see live view. Okay, this has something to do with the spacecraft. I can see the spacecraft. Any more information, you can scroll down. That's everything I wanted to talk about. If you have any questions, let me know. Complete the readings, and your homework this week is to look at some websites and see how they employ chunking and then getting people to move from chunk to chunk in the correct order.